This video contains spoilers for Dragon Quest III and 1, including their respective HD remakes. Watch at your own discretion. What is the best RPG video game? It's a question that has confounded us since the moment that a second RPG got released. This is a very charged and divisive question that only gets more contrived the more that subjectivity gets mistaken for objectivity. I bet everyone who's touched an RPG can name their favorite. We got that one with the evil corporation that's using its money and influence to destroy the planet, and then there's the one where a bunch of kids are forced to grapple with the corrupt societal structures failing humanity in the face of cosmic annihilation, and there's that one with the doomed mercenary trapped in a failing corporatocracy, and also the one where a bunch of kids are forced to grapple with the corrupt societal structures failing humanity in the face of cosmic annihilation, and also that one with the co-op that doesn't have any politics in it whatsoever, and also that French time loop game that I just won't stop bringing up. And also Dungeons & Dragons is here too. Look, my point is, there are a lot of contenders for best RPG, but there is one that's been making a pretty strong case for itself since its initial release. A game that single-handedly redefined what we would come to expect from RPGs. A game so titanic they literally couldn't manage to fit a proper title screen on the original cartridge. The legendary Dragon Quest III. Okay, so there's this urban legend around Dragon Quest III's release. It goes something like this. Dragon Quest I came out at a time when Japanese game industries had little to no faith in RPG as a genre. So when DQ1 managed to not only move copies but become a hit game, the people with money started to think, maybe people are interested in these things. And so Dragon Quest II got greenlit. 7 months later, Enix had another banger on their hands, managing to sell something like 2.4 million copies by year's end. So they made a third one. By this point, Dragon Quest had become a bit of a cultural phenomenon in Japan, and people showed up for this one. Thousands of fans of all ages lined up outside game stores to buy their copy of Dragon Quest III. And on a Thursday. Allegedly, there was a measurable productivity drop. And here is where the urban legend comes in. Supposedly, the Japanese government had to institute a law that all future Dragon Quest entries had to be released on Saturday to minimize disruption to school and work. Now, as you can probably guess, no such law exists. No, series creator Yuji Horii just decided to do that himself. Imagine knocking it out of the park back to back to back and then feeling bad because you managed to slightly disrupt your country's economic and education systems. Game studios pray to get the kind of reception DQ2 got as a sequel, but to ramp it up for a third time? It's like some sort of gaming hack. Following a development that can only be described as harrowing, Enix released a sequel to their hit RPG Dragon Quest in January of 1987. While Dragon Quest II would go on to be a critical and financial hit, the time working on the game had left the team feeling burned out and only a little bit like husks. So, what better way to rest and recoup than by taking a boys' trip to a hot springs resort? Now, the plan was for everyone to take a nice and relaxing work-free vacation, but what if we brainstorm just a little? So they, ended up with all these new ideas for their new game. Now that they had a whopping 2 megabits of memory to work with, they could do some super cool stuff, like add another party member. While Dragon Quest II had expanded the player's team from 1 to 3 characters, the third installment decided that 4 seemed like a better number. Additionally, while the previous 2 entries had featured pre-made party members, the team decided it would be super cool for the player to be able to design their own heroes. Early on, players are presented with the ability to design custom party members, selecting from a list of classes like Warrior, Mage, Cleric, and even some more out-there picks like Merchant or Gadabout. This is even further expanded with the inclusion of All Trades Abbey, a location that allows level 20 characters to switch their classes starting over at level 1, but retaining half of their previous class's stats as well as any learned spells. This provides a crazy amount of customization, only limited by the player's creativity and free time. The one restriction of this system is the main player character who is locked into the Hero class, which plays kind of like an amped up spell sword similar to DQ1's Hero. That said, the game does allow players to now select between playing as a male or female hero, although the overworld sprite doesn't really look all that different. Another cool feature thought up during this impromptu planning session was a day-night feature. While traveling across the world, the time of day would shift after a certain number of steps. In town, NPCs would have different dialogue and placement based on whether it was day or night, and in the field, enemies would appear in different formations and generally be stronger once the sun went down. This system would even be used during the game's story, as certain locations and events would only be accessible during a specific time of day. Following the team's return from their retreat, Horii set to work coming up with ideas for the game's setting and story. Feeling the pressure to not only follow up, but surpass the previous games, Hori elected to take the plot in an ambitious new direction. Where Dragon Quest I and II are set in a shared world following the adventures of the descendants of the legendary hero Erdrick, Dragon Quest III introduced a brand new, yet distinctly familiar world modeled after our own. This played into the game's story, a globe-trotting adventure to collect magical items to eventually defeat the evil archfiend threatening the safety of the world. This conveniently gave the team an excuse to do some traveling of their own, including a visit to the pyramids in Egypt. Come March, development started in earnest. The new game's world, towns, dungeons, and people were designed by Hori and Hiroshi Miyaoka, a college from Shonen Jump who had assisted with the previous 2 games. During this time, special consideration was paid to the game's dungeon design, hoping to avoid the pitfalls that had resulted in Dragon Quest II needing a 1-month delay and hectic last-minute gameplay rebalancing. By midsummer, the team had begun working on the myriad NPCs populating the world, not only implementing their dialogue but also designing their schedules and events dependent on the day-night cycle. At the same time, Koichi Nakamura and his team at Chunsoft were hard at work programming the game's gameplay and battle systems. Continuing his shift to a more directorial role starting in DQ2, Nakamura planned to reduce his programming contributions to 10%. He felt that taking more of a leadership position was better aligned with his role as head of Chunsoft. That said, it was his self-admitted inexperience with this type of work that had contributed to DQ2's complicated development, and so we saw DQ3 as a sort of redemption. Re-upping on programmers after a bunch of them left for other studios, the team set to work adapting the designs put forth in the original January planning session. One of these ideas was to overhaul the monster AI, allowing enemies a much greater level of strategy and personality. One of the best examples of this is through their MP management. More intelligent monsters conserved magic and even tried stealing it from the party to continue casting spells. Meanwhile, less intelligent monsters, like the Imp, will try and cast incredibly powerful spells they have nowhere near enough MP to resolve. Around September, lead character and monster designer Akira Toriyama, yes, Dragon Ball Z Akira Toriyama, finished up the last bit of enemy key art, allowing the team to go all in on battle design. This meant deciding what parts of the world each monster lived in, as well as what types of attacks and battle style they employed. It was around this time, late into the year in development, that Hori and the writing team came up with the game's main plot twist. Nowadays, this twist is so well known that anyone with even a little knowledge of the Dragon Quest franchise already knows exactly what happens. I mean, hell, it was part of the HD Remakes marketing. But there is a chance that for you watching this video right now, this is your very first exposure to Dragon Quest III. So, just for fun, we're going to wait to get into the twist till it actually comes up. Because of this narrative choice, the game's composer, Koichi Sugiyama, decided on a more classical tone for the game's soundtrack, and also incorporated musical traits of the real-world regions featured in DQ3's alternate Earth. Okay, this is the part of the video where we get to have the Sugiyama talk. One of the Dragon Quest franchise's defining features is its soundtrack. The music is usually very, very good. The man who composed the music, not so good. In fact, not so good doesn't even manage to scratch the surface of how awful this scumbag was. Imagine becoming a famous and wealthy artist, and then almost exclusively using your wealth in a desperate bid for oppression and historical revisionism, pushing the narrative that not only were the literal war crimes committed by Japan during World War II not that big a deal, but that they were completely justified. This motherfucker heard about shit like Unit 731 and actively took steps to pretend the Imperial Japanese Army wasn't monstrous. The only good thing about talking about Sugiyama is that you get to do it entirely in past tense. Good riddance. Now, where were we? Oh, right, game's almost done. Having learned from DQ2, the team continued adjustments and bug testing up to October 22nd, when the final build was sent off for cartridge production. By the time the finished game shipped, they had so much content in it that they didn't have space left in the cart for a title screen, instead using a simple text box to display the game's name. I'll admit, it does look clean, but it would be really cool if they had some way to re-release the game with a bit more storage to get a proper title screen on there. You know, like some sort of Dragon Quest III sold very well. Like, over 1 million copies sold on the first day of sales, well. Best-selling game in Japan between 1986 and 1989, kinda well. So, understandably, they decided to bring the game to foreign markets. The North American version of the game actually made some significant changes and additions. Since larger cartridge sizes were the norm over in the Americas, the team had enough space to not only add a title screen, but also add some unique sprites for the player character's father, including the super impressive animation of him fighting a dragon on the edge of a volcano. Very cool. Now, believe it or not, the HD 2D remake wasn't actually the first time DQ3 got a remake or remaster. It's actually like the 9th version of the game? The very first remaster began development in 1995, following the release of Dragon Quest VI for the Super Famicom that same year. This version of the game featured an art style based on the 6th entry, as well as all of the quality of life features that series had accumulated since 3's original release. But it wasn't just aesthetic and system changes for the Super Famicom remake. This version of the game boasted new content as well. Most notably, the inclusion of the personality system, an idea Hori came up with inspired by his time writing for 17 magazine. This feature introduced a bevy of personalities for player characters that helped determine their stat growth, as well as adding a bit more flavor and strategy to character creation. Additionally, a new class, Thief, was added, offering players a speedy new martial character that had the ability to occasionally pick up items at the end of combat. There was also a new minigame added in the form of the DQ5 board game-styled sub-game Treasures and Trapdoors, or Pachisi as it is most commonly known. Players were able to win new, powerful items by completing the different boards scattered out the world. The game also featured a special bonus post-game dungeon inspired by a location from Dragon Quest VI. Finally, the original North American exclusive Ortega cutscenes and sprites were expanded into a detailed opening animation showing his journey leading up to the battle at the volcano, as well as modifying a scene in the town of Mirror to reference the hero. Unfortunately, due to the original DQ3's poor sales in the States, as well as the closure of Enix's American office, this version of the game never made it to North America. Several years later, Dragon Quest III would see another port, this time to the Game Boy Color. This version of the game is honestly kind of a miracle port. Somehow they managed to cram all of the content from the Super Famicom remake alongside the cut mini medal system, new monster medals, and a second post-game dungeon, the Ice Cave, into a cartridge that's like that big. They even managed to preserve the Super Famicom version's monster animation. How? This one did get a global release. In 2009, the game was ported once again, this time exclusively for Japanese phones. While generally just a port of the Super Famicom version of the game, this version ended up removing content, specifically the Pachisi boards, the GBC's Ice Cave dungeon, and the Ortega cutscenes. This release would become available worldwide for smartphones in 2014, alongside Super Famicom-inspired ports of Dragon Quest I and II. While no new content was added in this port, it did feature a new, modernized script for the game that was more in line with what would become standard for the franchise. Finally, in 2017, a new version of the mobile ports was released for PS4 and 5, as well as the Switch. This version looks hideous. For whatever reason, they decided to keep the Super Famicom-sized tile sets, but then use these weird, larger, more detailed sprites for the player characters and NPCs. And then, in combat, they don't even use sprites for monsters, instead using these slightly off-looking renders of the monsters. And all of this is paired with these super sterile, mobile-looking menus and text. I don't know, man. It's just aesthetically distressing to look at it. I don't like it. Ew. Needless to say, the official methods to play DQ3 were starting to look pretty dire. What they needed to do next was a complete overhaul. Who am I kidding? Y'all know what comes next. In 2021, Square Enix announced that as part of the series' 35th anniversary, they were developing a remake to Dragon Quest III. Similar to the Super Famicom remake from the 90s, this version would bring modern systems and quality of life improvements associated with the most recent entries to the legendary third game. The game's art style takes a page out of Octopath Traveler's book, blending detailed 3D environments with gorgeous sprite work. Additionally, the story was enhanced through expanded scenes, voice acting, new story-relevant boss fights, and a substantially developed story for Ortega. Now, normally at this point, we dive into one of the original releases of the game to have like a basis with which we could compare the remake. However, unlike the Dragon Quest I and II remakes that follow it, Dragon Quest III HD is a surprisingly faithful remake. As opposed to something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which completely changes how the game and story are experienced, DQ3 HD is structurally just a modern upgrade to the Super Famicom release of the game. Instead of splitting the video into a classic version section and a remake version section, we're just gonna launch right into DQ3 HD and we'll just talk version differences when they come up. So, without any further ado, our hero awakens in a strange forest, beckoned by a mysterious voice. Following it, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a cliff. The voice states it belongs to she who watches over all, and that one day we will stand before her, a true hero. But before that, we need to tell her a bit more about ourselves. Dragon Quest III's personality quiz is a series of yes or no questions that slowly work you through a very complicated web of potential questions leading to one of 8 scenarios, with the way you approach whichever scenario you get finally determining the hero's personality. It's a really cool way to start the game. Answering the questions truthfully can lead to some unexpected outcomes, resulting in a hero that can feel uniquely you. Or you can just pick the best answers. I'll touch on this when we finally get to putting our party together. After answering the voice's questions and getting read to absolute filth, the game opens on the morning of the hero's 16th birthday. Today is the day we're set to embark on our great journey, and our mother is worried sick. Many years ago, when the hero was still an infant, their father, the great warrior Ortega, set forth on a similar quest. Unfortunately, news would come a few years later that Ortega had disappeared after setting off to climb the great volcano Mount Necrogond. Now it's our turn, hopefully without the whole potentially dying in a volcano thing. Throwing on our clothes and equipment, we set out from home and damn, this town looks gorgeous. For reference, this is what the starting city of Aliahan looks like in the Super Famicom art style. All the cities across the game have been giving a substantial graphical touch-up. The kingdoms of Romaria and Portoga look absolutely stunning, and once generic-looking towns like Baharata, Asham, and Mura have been altered to better reflect their real-world geographic locations. You know, I wasn't really sold on this whole HD 2D art style at first, but I really think I'm starting to come around to it. It certainly feels like a massive upgrade to Octopath's design, but I think that game is really done dirty by its lighting engine. We arrive before the king, who is determined to remind us our dad is dead, and immediately have a trauma flashback. After that, the king lets us know what the plot is. Many years ago, the archfiend Baramos appeared, laying waste to a small kingdom and spreading his evil influence across the world. And also, he's like really strong or something, so the king advises we pick up some friends. So we just jog on over to Patty's party planning place to round out the party. One of the key selling points to Dragon Quest III is the high level of party customization. When creating a character, you're first prompted to pick their name, then their starting vocation. Dragon Quest III HD brings back the original 6 classes of warrior, martial artist, mage, priest, merchant, and gadabout, as well as the thief class added in the Super Famicom remake. Additionally, this version of the game features a new class, the Monster Wrangler. While the Monster Wrangler has technically existed since Dragon Quest V, this version of the class is based on Dragon Quest X, a game that I'm not even sure if I'll be able to review. Once you've picked the character's vocation, you're prompted to pick their body type, then from one of 4 sub-designs before finally picking their hair color. Not gonna lie, I was honestly really blown away by this. It might seem kind of stupid, but I was honestly expecting to just have whatever generic gender and sprite was tied to the vocation and that'd just be the end of things. But no, we're given even more freedom to make our party members look exactly how we want them to. After picking their appearance, we're told that we get to assign our character 5 stat seeds to help determine their starting stats and personality. This is gonna get a little confusing, and I'll be honest, I don't even know if I fully understand it 100%, but I'll get some visuals and try my best. Every character gets a set of starting stats based on their starting vocation and body type. I'm not sure how much these specific numbers have changed since the original release, but from what I gather, the calculations haven't really been altered. In general, vocations will favor certain stats, like how warriors start with high strength and vitality, and how priests and mages get a boost to agility and intelligence. Once you've selected your vocation and body, the game will assign a random number of stat bonuses to random stats. Basically what this does is roll a virtual weighted 10-sided dice to determine how much of these are applied. On average, you'll end up in the 4 to 7 range, but it is possible to get a full 10. And then it just jams the points in wherever. If I understand this correctly, while very unlikely, it is mathematically possible to pick a gadabout which starts with 10 in luck and then have all 10 bonuses put into your luck for a max of 20. After giving you your bonuses, the game presents you with the 5 seeds. You can either assign these yourself or let the computer do it. Each time you select a stat, the seed will give you 1 to 3 points in that stat at random. You like how much randomness is in this process yet? We'll get ready for this next bit. Once the seed bonuses are applied, the game will check your 2 highest stats and pull from one of 5 tables. Each of these tables is separated by class and then by stat number. Let's use warrior with strength as their highest stat as an example. If strength is 11 points or greater, you'll have access to Paragon, Meathead, and Amazon personalities. If strength is 7 or greater, you get Meathead, Idealist, Tearaway, or Thug. If strength is 6 or less, and vitality is your second highest, you get Thug, Gourmand, Charmer, and Amazon. If strength is the same, but agility is second highest, you get Daredevil, Tearaway, Klutz, and Sore Loser. And finally, if strength is the same, but neither vitality nor agility are your second highest, you get access to Charmer, Lout, Free Spirit, Straight Arrow, and Everyman. Every table is just as complicated and has a lot of different numbers it checks, but you might be wondering, how then do you choose which personality you get based on which slot you fit into? That's the neat part. You don't. After all of these random stat bonuses and table checks, the game will just pick your character's personality from the list at complete random. Yay. Here's where things get frustrating, as if they aren't already frustrating. Because of how personalities impact stat growth, there are certain options that are objectively better than others. For example, both the Wit and Genius personalities boost the character's Wisdom stat growth. However, while Wit gives an A in Wisdom and then Ds and Es in all their stats, Genius offers an S in Wisdom and a B in Agility, traits incredibly valuable in casters, even at the cost of an F in Stamina and Luck. This puts stat-minded players in an awkward position of having optimal personalities gated behind RNG. Anytime you attempt to create a new party member, you run into the risk of ending up with undesirable results. If you're just here for flavor and or immersion, you can basically just ignore all of this, but if you're hoping to take on some of the end game content, you're going to have to try and plan ahead. Going into party creation, I knew I wanted to have a monster angler on the team. Meet Lyle. I might have absolutely fumbled her personality because I didn't understand the system at the time, but she's going to be our second melee fighter. It'll also be important to bring both a mage and priest to cover our spellcasting bases, so allow me to introduce Balthazar and Calima... Really? With our team ready to go, we're free to take our first steps into the wide open world. Okay, well, the island is kinda, sorta, really big. The overworld of Dragon Quest III HD feels grand. The scale of the character sprites against a 3D environment really helps sell how large the world is, especially when you compare it to how the older version of the games look. Setting forth from Alihan, we aren't given a lot of direction besides maybe try checking out the village of Reeve to the north. So north we go. And almost immediately we get into our first random encounter. Man, look at all these sick animated enemy sprites. Much like the rest of the gameplay, DQ3 HD's combat is incredibly straightforward. You and your team line up against the enemy and take turns throwing attacks out until one side is left standing. While the system was put in place with DQ1 in the 80s, each subsequent Dragon Quest entry has slightly improved and evolved the design since. Two of the most impactful of these additions are abilities and elemental weaknesses. While abilities were introduced for monster party members in Dragon Quest V, it wasn't until Dragon Quest VI that human allies would begin getting skills of their own. In every version of DQ3, prior to the remakes, martial jobs were unable to learn any unique skills or abilities. Instead of being able to apply buffs, debuffs, or even target enemy vulnerabilities, they just hit stuff. Warriors hit hard, martial artists hit fast and crit a lot, and that was basically it. I mean, even the thief, who was kinda just hits fast and not as hard, doesn't really have any unique in-combat skills, instead having the theft ability as a chance to steal at the end of battle. Thanks to DQ6, that's completely changed with this remake. Now physical fighters pick up special attacks that hit multiple times, alter stats, or even take advantage of enemy weaknesses. The weakness thing has also been applied to spells too. Thanks to a change introduced with Dragon Quest IX, most monsters have some sort of resistance or weakness to attacks of specific elements. For example, undead enemies like zombies and mummies tend to be weak to fire, and aquatic enemies like the squid are weak to lightning attacks. It's super easy to tell if an attack worked out thanks to these different colored damage numbers. The same applies to offensive abilities, although those tend to say what they're strong against outright. Regardless, modern Dragon Quest has changed from a mostly numbers and health management game to one in which having certain skills and spells can vastly alter the outcome of battle. We arrive in Reeve at dusk and get to appreciate the updated day-night cycle. We got 4 times a day now instead of just 2. Here in town, we learn about a strange item called the Wrecking Ball that does something, and that allegedly some dude lives at the top of the Dreamer's Tower and has the Thief's Key. The Dreamer's Tower is found on this island smack dab in the middle of the bay next to Aliahan. Seeing as we don't have a boat and aren't some sort of swimming superstar, our only option is to use this network of tunnels that crisscross under the continent. The tower itself isn't a particularly difficult dungeon, we're able to easily scale to the top. Up here, there's this sleeping old guy who wakes up for about 5 seconds to hand us a thief's key and then tells us to go visit the house in Reeve with the locked red door. We pop in and some old dude understandably freaks out about a home intruder. Until we show him the key, of course. He correctly guesses that we're related to the hero Tega and gleefully hands us the Wrecking Ball, which is just a bomb. We're given our next objective, the shrine on the easternmost side of the continent, and set off on our way. Though I suppose we should drop off our mini-medals before we go, shouldn't we? A garter? Okay, but in all seriously, this is arguably one of the best accessories in the game. While its defense stats are kinda mid, it does change the equipped character's personality to Vamp, the best overall personality in the game, and can be equipped by male characters. In original DQ3, basically every accessory changed your character's personality, which made most of them bad since they screwed with your stat growth. But in the remakes, we've got 2 accessory slots. The top one allows for personality changes, while the bottom slot just does the stat modification, which means you can put a non-personality item in your primary slot to not screw with your stats or keep a certain personality on your character even after you find a better accessory. Very cool. Arriving at the Path of Promise, we find that the way forward is blocked by this big-ass rock, which is what the bomb is for. The rest of the path is a slightly confusing dungeon featuring slightly stronger variants of the enemies we've been seeing so far. In the very depths, we find a teleportal which whisks us away to lands unknown. Emerging from the Shrine of Promise, we find ourselves in a lush forest, and immediately run into some dude named Monty the Monster Monitor, or, as he's known in Japanese, the Monster Grandpa. Basically, he's the introduction to a minigame that we'll get into in just a moment. But first, we step out into the vast new land, Italy. The first step on our quest is the Kingdom of Romaria, which looks so fucking pretty. There's a lot to take in here. The Grand Fountain, beautiful sculptures, sprawling greenery, the monster arena. Yeah, so basically this game has underground monster blood sports. In the original game and the mobile port, you could bet on monster fights and try and make some quick cash. Shout out to my goat Killer Pillar. However, since rating changes have reclassified gambling, betting isn't an option anymore. Now, instead, you're the one in the fighting pits. Aside from a kick-ass design and a frankly overpowered AoE attack that deals fixed damage to enemies, the main purpose of Monster Wrangler is to recruit friendly monsters. This boosts the damage of the aforementioned overpowered AoE attack that deals fixed damage to enemies, as well as recruits new monsters that can participate in the monster arena. And why would you want to participate in the monster arena, you might be wondering? Money. And a lot of it. Oh, and also exclusive weapons, armor, and items that used to be tied to the removed Pachisi boards. Finally deciding to stop screwing around in the gladiator pits, we make our way to the castle. When we arrive in the throne room, the king almost immediately clocks us as the hero sent by Aliahan. How does he do that? Well, we look like our dad, of course. Now, before he offers us any actual help, he asks us for help with a very important matter. Turns out a dastardly rogue by the name of Robin Hood has stolen the king's crown, and he would consider it an act of true heroism if we were to get it back for him. Sure. There's nothing more pressing for me to be doing right now, after all. Now, as you might expect, the king doesn't have any useful info to help us on our quest, so we'll just kind of have to figure it out on our own. Luckily, as we head north through the Romarian Road, we catch a contingent of soldiers heading to Skyfell Tower to capture the thief. The commander also informs us that without the magic key, we won't be able to cross the checkpoint to reach the Kingdom of Portoga. So that's cool, I guess. The mountain village of Koriv is our next stop. It's here that we hear rumors that the people of the northmost village of Norvik have been trapped by a sleeping curse. Oh, dang, we should go check that out. They were not lying. It is quite literally Snoozeville here. After checking every chest and dresser, we run into the one guy not sleeping. Turns out his son fell in love with the daughter of the fairy queen, and the two ran off west with the Dreamstone. Heading that way, we stumble into the secret fairy village. But nobody will talk to us. Except for the queen, who hates humans and announces that she was the one who cursed the village as punishment for the man's son tricking her daughter and stealing the Dreamstone. Allegedly. Well, I think we should get to the bottom of this ourselves. Let's go check out the underground lake, the place where the two were last seen. We find our way through a sort of tricky dungeon, we're not actually supposed to be doing this quite yet, before eventually reaching the underground lake in question. In the center is a small shrine with a box set on top. Inside we find the Dreamstone, as well as a note from the missing fairy to her mother. Turns out the fairy queen was so bigoted against humans that the girl saw no reason to live if she and her beloved couldn't be together, so the two of them threw themselves into the ocean so they could be together in the next life. Jesus. We return to the fairy queen and give her the stone and letter. Racked with guilt, she lifts the curse on Norvik and begs us to leave her alone. You don't actually get anything special for saving Norvik, just some slightly stronger equipment from their item shop. In fact, this entire small questline is entirely optional. You could play the entire game from start to finish and never ever set foot in Norvik. Helping people does feel nice though. Our next step is to actually go get that crown back. West of Koriv lies Skyfell Tower, this weirdly off-center structure. It's a bit of a dump and currently inhabited by Robin Hood and his gang. We fight our way up through the tower's monstrous denizens before arriving at the thieves' lair. When we actually find Robin, he pulls the old trapdoor floor getaway trick on us, so we dive out the window after him. The fight against Robin Hood and his hoodlums isn't especially difficult, but they've got this one trick where each enemy in the fight is considered its own group, meaning multi-target spells just doesn't work on them. Unless, of course, you're packing a magical hand grenade. Defeated, Robin begs us to spare him. When we agree, he leaves the crown and gets the fuck out of Dodge. Now we can take this thing back to Romaria, where the king is so pleased that he declares us a true hero and offers us his kingdom as a reward. Turning him down just makes him ask again, and again, and again. I'm pretty sure you have to turn him down like 8 times or something. If you do accept, you end up trapped in the city as its new ruler, and you can't actually do anything. You just wander the town and talk to people. If you want to get back to save the world, you've got to hunt the slacker down in the monster arena where he's having a great time gambling. He'll act super bummed about having to be king again, but agrees to take the crown back. And then, this motherfucker has the gall to tell us that being king was probably a good experience for us. So fuck this guy. Our primary objective is to get our hands on a ship so we can have access to the rest of the world, and the best place to get one would be the Kingdom of Portoga. Still no magic key though. But we've already checked everywhere except east of Koriv, so I guess that's our next best bet. Eventually we reach the city of Asham, which lies just north of the Great Desert. Both Asham and Ibis, the Oasis Kingdom in the desert, don't really have a lot of story significance and mostly serve to flesh out the world, provide a setting for collecting the magic key, and get our 1980s mandated stereotypical Egypt-themed West Asia, North Africa region. Hey, but at least there's a pyramid! Oh my god. The Queen of Ibis doesn't have any random fetch quests for us, but is at least willing to warn us about how dangerous the pyramid and catacombs under the palace are. Speaking of which, there's a meteorite bracer down here. We upgrade our gear, then set out across the dunes for the pyramid. Much like the rest of the game, the pyramid has received a substantial graphical and design upgrade. Instead of this mess of grayish colored corridors from the original, now it feels like we're in a proper ancient tomb. Now, it could just be me, but this dungeon feels like it has a strangely high encounter rate. Yes, taking the golden claws in the basement invokes the Pharaoh's curse and gives you a 100% encounter rate, but like, just in general, I don't know. Stepping into the Magic Key's chamber, we come face to face with a monster called the Ripper of the Rift. He's one of Baramos' lieutenants and has been tasked with slowing down or outright stopping our progress. In his case, he's gonna take the Magic Key. The Ripper is one of a few brand new bosses added to the remake. They've been included in locations and moments of significance throughout the story to add a bit more difficulty and elevate the narrative. They also help flesh out Baramos' character a bit, which doesn't really exist in any of the original releases. Oh, and kind of complicates the twist I mentioned toward the start of the video, but of course we'll get to that later. As the Ripper falls, he laments failing the Archfiend before offering an ominous threat about some monster called the Boss Troll. Ooh, hey look, a magic key! Now that we've got the magic key, we can finally cross the Romarian checkpoint to reach Portoga. Finally, we're gonna have our own boat, is what I would say if it wasn't about time for some local monarch to give us a bullshit quest again. The people of Portoga are obsessed with black pepper, and given that he's in charge, the king decides that the only way that he'll even consider helping us is if we travel to Baharata and bring him some pepper back. Yeah, but don't worry, this brave act will be truly heroic. Fucking worthless royals. Since we don't have a boat, thanks for nothing, dickhead, the only way to reach Baharata is to cross this mountain range. And the only way to do that is through a tunnel excavated by the dwarf Nordi. Now, Nordi isn't a big fan of people, but he is a friend of the King of Portoga. Just a friend. Absolutely nothing else. Anyways, now that we're clear of the mountains, we can make our way down and around until we finally reach Baharata. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're gonna get any of that pepper anytime soon. Upon entering the town, we get caught up in an argument between the local pepper merchant and his future grandson-in-law, Gopal. Just a bit before we arrived, kidnappers abducted the merchant's granddaughter, Tanaya, and now Gopal is planning to try and stage a rescue. Oh, buddy, you've got a generic townsperson sprite. You're not saving anyone. As hopeless as Gopal is, he doesn't deserve to get kidnapped too, so we should probably go and help him. Kidnapper's Cave has always been a pretty boring dungeon, and unfortunately the remake doesn't really do a whole lot to fix that. In the dungeon's basement, we run into some thugs who attack us when we tell them we're not actually here to join their gang. We find Gopal and Tanaya in the back, locked in separate cells. Throwing a lever frees the two lovebirds, but before we can escape, we bump into a familiar-looking hoodlum. Robin's back. Why are you blue? He hits really hard this time around. So hard, in fact, that Balthazar and the hero barely clutched out a victory. Once again, Robin begs for his life, and despite Balthazar looking like she's about to execute him, we agree to let him go. This will turn out to be one of the most pivotal choices we make in this game. Not like you can actually kill him here, but, you know, whatever. We return to Baharata to pick up our pepper, but Gopal informs us that his shipment hasn't arrived yet. Fortunately, he gives us a letter so we can collect our reward directly from his supplier. We just gotta head up north to All Trades Abbey to pick it up. Is this the least subtle way of pointing the player towards the Abbey? Yes. But now's as good a time as any to get into class change. Once a character reaches level 20, you can bring them to All Trades Abbey to change their class. Any class can change into any other class at the cost of returning to level 1. While that may sound like a bad deal at first, it's important to note that characters retain all learned spells and abilities, as well as keep half of their stats they had prior to resetting. This allows you to continue stacking stats and skills to make your party even stronger than before. For example, you could start with a thief that you later change into a warrior to have a super fast, hard-hitting melee fighter. Or change a warrior into a priest to have a healer with bulkier stats. Additionally, this unlocks the ability to change a character into the 10th secret class, the Sage. Sages can learn all the spells from both the mage and priest spell lists and also boast higher defense and attack than your standard magic caster. Basically, the Sage is supposed to be like the ultimate class. There is one problem though. There are only two ways to class change into a Sage. First is to use a consumable item called the Words of Wisdom, of which there are only 3 in the game, and the second is to level up a Gadabout. The Gadabout is sort of like a joke class, meant mostly for flavor. What they do during combat is completely random. Sure, they could attack the enemy, or they could just take a nap. Turns out, the Gadabout has a hidden passive ability known as clowning around. Every time you attack, the game will roll to see if the Gadabout follows directions or instead opts to do some wacky antic. These range from singing a song, to telling a joke, or to just hucking a giant rock at a random target, party members included. Every couple levels, a new action is added to the table with its own percentage chance of being selected. This makes them incredibly unreliable in battle, and while they have an insane luck growth, the class doesn't learn any spells or skills outside of Whistle at level 15, or at least that was the case for the original game. Thanks to the addition of abilities in the remake, the Gadabout now has 6 new skills to pick up. Yeah, that tracks. So, turns out 3 of the traditionally stronger abilities are all at the end of the clown skill tree. This is especially awkward since the general practice would be to immediately switch to a Sage the second your Gadabout hits level 20. Well, it's a good thing that I'm not planning to do anything stupid like switch to a Gadabout mid-playthrough or anything. Hey, don't look at that! I'm still missing out on certain skills for my current classes, so I think I'll hold off on changing for the time being. Now, let's go get that boat. We take the pepper back to the king and he declares that we are true heroes. Then he throws a banquet in our honor. And finally, come the next day, we have our boat. Now we can set sail and explore the world, searching high and low to... The night of the banquet, we receive a dream. The voice from the personality quiz informs us that we must go forth and collect the orbs. Okay, what are the orbs? The following morning, the King of Portoga warns us that he has heard that something bad has happened in the Kingdom of Japan and Minoza, which is all cool, but we don't know where those places are. And so we set sail for the open waves. We have officially entered the globe-trotting section of the globe-trotting Dragon Quest. And the only issue is that I'm not sure what direction I should start trotting towards. Look, I know I'm supposed to find these orbs, but I'm not really sure where to find them or what they even look like. Luckily enough, the lighthouse across the strait from Portoga has some random adventures with some small plot hooks. Believe it or not, these guys are all brand new to the remake. Originally, the only person here was the lighthouse keeper, who was the first one to tell us that the orbs even existed, though he also didn't tell you why you needed them. Even in the remake, this game isn't super good about telling us what we're supposed to be doing or how, which I guess makes sense. While the game has a fresh coat of paint and no few changes to its structure and presentation, under all of that, it's still just that Famicom adventure game from the 80s. At this point, we need to start just talking to everyone to hopefully find a lead. So we kind of just sail off, wrapping around the map and ending up on this small landmass known as Grimland, which, we're not a high enough level for yet. However, because of that, when we do find an actual settlement, we get some really solid upgrades. There's also this old man in this house. He's looking for something called a mod rod, and he's willing to trade an item called the boatman's bone for it. This is for a later quest chain, so we're gonna just set that aside. From here, we sail south to find this random shack on the coast of the Western continent. There's an old dude here who wants to start a town, but he needs a merchant. Introducing Tobias. Okay, bye Tobias. We sail into the continent proper, weaving through this network of rivers before arriving at the town of Persistence. This town has had a complicated history over the different versions of this game, but at least we've moved away from the tasteless Native American stereotyping. Speaking of American history, there's an old dude living in the well at the center of the town, who says he used to be a soldier from the Kingdom of Edina, but he was abandoned when his regiment left Persistence and forgot him. Many years ago, the soldiers from Edina arrived in the village and stole one of the village's most important cultural artifacts, the bottomless pot. This is also part of a different quest chain. We'll address this one a little bit sooner than the other. Just bear with me for a second. We sail south along the coast, eventually finding the base of a gang of pirates. It's day, so they're not here, so we get to just kind of loot everything. There's also this fancy-looking statue outside with an ominous red glow shining from underneath. We can push the thing aside to find a small room with 2 treasures. Oh shit, the red orb! Nice! Next, we continue sailing around, bumping into random little locations, like the village of Lozami, where they send all the neurodivergent people to die, and the town of Muir, where everybody thinks we look like some dude named Perdvishnik. Whoever this guy is, everyone here thinks he's the coolest dude to ever do it. Walking around the town, basically every person will comment on how Perdvishnik changed their life, or that we look like him, and then tell you about how he changed their life. Now, if you're like me, at this point, you're probably asking, what's this guy's deal? Well, if you come around to the back of these shops, you can find a storage room with this old dude chilling. He tells us about when Perdvishnik arrived in the village some years ago. Wait a second. Oh, okay. So it turns out that guy's actually Ortega. Somehow, dear old dad ended up in Muir after suffering some pretty nasty injuries and stayed in town for a bit before recovering. However, before he was fully healed, monsters attacked the village and he was forced to fend them off on his own. Shortly afterwards, Ortega left to continue his quest and has not been seen since. As we leave, one of the villagers realizes that both Ortega and us come from Aliahan and asks if we'll return his old helmet to his family. Before returning to our own journey, we stop by to show the helmet to our mom to get a very special scene. Ah yes, sadness. Anyways, Japan time. Far to the east lies the island nation of Japan. Ruled by the wise Queen Pimiko, the nation has suffered under the tyrannical shadow of the monstrous Orochi, a many-headed dragon that demands maidens be sacrificed to it to save the village. If you've ever heard the story of Yamato no Orochi, we're basically just gonna do that right now. But you know, we're pretty strong. Why don't we just go and deal with this Orochi guy?
Begone! I will not trade words with barbarians.
Well, screw you, lady. I think I'm just gonna do it anyways. You know, I'm going over here. We head over to Orochi's lair and fight our way through the lava caves until we finally stand face to face with the beast. Orochi is really tough, and we just barely manage to avoid a complete party wipe. The monster vanishes in a puff of smoke, leaving behind a portal that connects to the palace back in Japan? We rush into the throne room and find Pimiko battered and wounded. She telepathically tells us that if we don't reveal that she's actually Orochi, she'll let us leave alive. Nah. Oh, sick! The grass cutter sword! And also the purple orb, I guess that's also kind of important. That night, we get another vision, this time informing us that we must take the orbs to the Shrine of the Everbird, which I suppose is a little bit more to go off of. Now that we're a bit further along, I suppose we might as well go back to the whole bottomless pot thing. We stop by the city of Lanson to buy some fading jennies from the Australians. Then we head over to Adina to steal the pot from the British. They're a bunch of dickheads anyways. Next, we sail over to this rocky spot in the middle of the ocean and just kind of drop the pot. We're really lucky that the whole ocean doesn't drain away, and we gain access to the Shallows Shrine, which houses the ultimate key. Then this spooky skeleton guy starts lore dumping. Apparently near the Archfiend's lair in the Necrogond, there exists an ominous dark chasm known as the Pit of Gyaga, which is, I guess, the root of all evil in the world. And then his head falls off. Spooky. You know, maybe we should check on Tobias. Oh, okay, well, there's a whole town here now. Fun fact, this town will be named whatever you name the merchant, then Berg. So in this playthrough, it's named Tobiasburg. But you could also end up with... Well, we'll get back to this place later, but for now we should probably put that new key to use. Our first stop is the temple in Lanson. The priest here tasks us with venturing into the desert alone. In the middle of the desert is a dungeon called Gaia's Navel, and at the bottom of the dungeon are two paths. One takes you to this weird blue rock, and the other leads to the blue orb. Oh, fuck, a monster. Chiromancer is another of the new bosses, and his design is a recolor of the Prestidigitator monster from Dragon Quest 1, which is, you know, it's kind of neat. We're still gonna kick his ass, though. The next thing we're gonna do is deal with that whole mod rod thing from earlier. But first, check out this cool map from behind the ultimate key door in Aliahan. Isn't that thing weird looking? You might be wondering, where is that a map of? Well, it's Dragon Quest XI's overworld, of course. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when the Dragon Quest II video comes out. Our lead on the mod rod points us towards the kingdom of Minoza. When we arrive, a funeral is being held for a man named Brenno, who from what we can gather, kinda just mildly inconvenienced the king and was executed as a result. This seems to be a reoccurring issue in the kingdom at the moment. Wow, look at that! Genuine criticism of monarchy and abuse of power in a medieval fantasy game. Sure hope this doesn't just turn out to be the work of some bad guy and that kings are fine, actually. Hint, hint. As we make our way to the castle, we're stopped by a young swordsman who tells us he's the son of the Minozan hero Simao. 10 years ago, the king falsely accused Simao of treason and threw him in prison somewhere. Allegedly, the king was once a good person, but changed into a tyrant seemingly overnight. Damn, that's crazy. Anyways, we walk into the castle and almost immediately get thrown in the dungeon for looking wrong. We let ourselves out with the ultimate key and promptly run into the real king. Yay. So it sounds like there's a monster disguised as the king, and our best bet to stop it is to collect a special mirror from a nearby cave. It just so happens that said cave is actually a troll dungeon where 90% of the chests are mimics. We survive and manage to find Ra's mirror, a powerful magic item that dispels illusions. Then we return to Minoza Castle at night and sneak into the king's chambers through the roof. Shining the light of Ra's mirror on the king reveals his true form, the boss troll. Wait, wasn't this guy supposed to be really— Holy shit! So one of the earliest plot hooks you get when first setting sail talks about the village of Thedon. Located far to the south of Portoga, the village lies unfortunately close to the Necrogond. According to lore, when Baramos first emerged from the Pit of Gyaga, he decided to be really funny to just obliterate Thedon. Oof. Now you'll notice there's like nothing and nobody here right now. However, if we come back at night, ghosts. The main reason I put off coming here until now is just because we need to get into that jail cell to talk to a guy, and it requires the ultimate key, which we don't have for the first half of this section. The prisoner has been waiting for years to give us the green orb, but before he can, the room is engulfed in ghostly flames as the dying fire emerges. These guys are another new boss and have been hanging out in Thedin to torment the souls that died in Baramos' invasion. Pro tip, while they do share a design with the dancing flame, these guys are actually cold aligned and take extra damage from Frizz and Sizz spells. With the fire extinguished, we are finally able to claim our 4th orb. As he vanishes, the ghost tells us to gather all the orbs and take them to the distant icy wastes of Rimland. We're still missing 2, but at least we can register it to fast travel later. Far to the south, we find the Shrine of the Everbird. According to the priestesses who tend to the shrine, if we successfully bring the orbs to the shrine, their power will hatch this colossal egg, and Ramia, the Everbird, will be reborn. They also let us know that at some point, Ortega also came here? Is there like anywhere this guy hasn't been? I decided to go check out Tobiasburg again, and along the way ended up in this little building. This is the Shrine of the Dwarf, home of, well, this dwarf. Turns out he traveled with Ortega some time ago. Then we get like a flashback of the dwarf and Ortega talking about how the hero's helmet is on its last legs. Ortega laments that it can't be repaired, and the dwarf comments that it could be fixed if they could get their hands on some Zenithium, which is a super rare mythical ore that probably just doesn't exist anymore. Damn. Anyways, check out Pfeiffer's Spire. It's an optional dungeon housing the Echo Flute, an item that emits a tone when an orb can be located near... Shit. I mean, I guess we'll just give the boss troll another try. So it turns out a couple more levels will just kind of fix all your problems. That night we receive yet another vision. This time the voice is super helpful and just outright tells us the next 3 steps of our quest. How generous. The following morning, the King of Minoza gives us the Mod Rod. It can be used to transform the party sprites into a bunch of random NPCs. While this is mostly for flavor, you can actually use it to disguise yourself and buy from the shop in the Secret Fairy Village. After doing some shopping, we head back to Grimland to trade the Mod Rod for the old man's boatman's bone. Why do we want some dude's bone? Well, we use it to track the ghost ship, of course. Why do we need to track the ghost ship? Well, there's this ghost of this lady Olivia who's haunting the Pacific Strait. Years ago, Baramos decided that she and her lover Eric were just a little too happy, so he killed the 2 of them and trapped the poor blighter's soul on the ghost ship. Ever since, her restless spirit has prevented anyone from sailing this way. We need to sail through here to continue our quest, so we gotta put those 2 spirits to rest. But before that, Tobiasburg has grown substantially, and so has Tobias's ego. The guy has gone full bourgeoisie and is now exploiting the working class. So anyway, there's a class uprising and they throw Tobias in jail. Nice work, guys. Now that the workers have seized the means of production and created a republic, we can pick up the yellow orb from Tobias's trashed house. Good riddance. Okay, now we'll find the ghost ship. Down in the hold of the boat, we find the Lover's Locket, which allows us to summon Eric's ghost when we approach the haunted passage. And now we can access the Inner Sea. The place we're looking for is the Shrine of Shackles, a prison far away from all civilization where Baramos sends people to die alone. Here we find the lamenting ghost of the hero Simao. For a time, Simao and Ortega traveled together, fighting against the Archfiend's forces. Eventually, their efforts drew Baramos' attention and more monsters were sent to defeat the 2 of them. Realizing they'd become a little too famous, they decided to split up and Ortega took on a new identity to try and get all the heat off himself. Unfortunately, shortly afterwards, when Simao returned to Minoza to try and stop the boss troll from seizing power, he was captured and locked in the Shrine of Shackles. Regretful that he cannot finish his mission, Simao's ghost gives us his sword, the Mountain Cleaver, and asks us to use it to cause Mount Necrogon to erupt. But first, I'd like to address the Ortega in the room. As you've probably noticed, unlike with the original release that chronicles Ortega's entire journey in the game's Attract mode, DQ3HD has elected to spread his story out across the entire world. This leads to a uniquely achronological history as the player slowly finds the myriad stories and flashbacks that piece together the man's doomed journey. Overall, I think this is a much better way to keep Ortega relevant throughout the whole of the game's plot and has the bonus of making more side characters connected to your father's journey. If there's any specific criticism I have about this choice, it's that this results in the whole narrative sort of feeling like you're chasing after your old man's shadow. Every time you accomplish some sort of goal, there's this unspoken implication that the great hero Ortega did it first. Hell, he even started trying to wake the Everbird before us. At every turn, our hero finds himself forced to measure against the greatness of their father, a true hero without measure, which is what makes Mount Necrogon work so well. East of Ibis lies a colossal mountain of flame, the volcano Mount Necrogond. We need to climb to the peak and hurl the Mountain Cleaver into the lava to force an eruption to open a path to the Necrogond proper. However, as we ready the blade, a fearsome winged beast swoops down to stop us. It gloats about how no other human has attempted to climb Mount Necrogon since some hero type, who kinda looks a little like us, died trying to fight him several years ago. This is Garboil, and he fucking slaps. Yeah, we're gonna have to make some changes here. By this point in the game, I'd started reaching the level where I'd collected all the spells and abilities I wanted on each of my characters. So naturally, it was finally time to start changing vocations. Lyle changed to a martial artist, vastly improving her speed and crit rate, as well as unlocking a bevy of new martial abilities. Kalamazoo became a thief, mostly just to benefit from the class's high speed stat and ability to occasionally yoink items from enemies. And with Balthazar, I made a bit of a misplay. The plan was always for her to eventually become a sage, but when researching the new abilities each class got, I learned about the existence of a very valuable technique. Channel Anger is a 16 MP ability that boosts a spellcaster's magical might for several turns. This is one of the only ways to further increase spell damage outside of boosting the wisdom stat. It's learned at level 45 by the Gadabout. So basically, we're gonna fight one of the harder bosses of the game with a literal clown on the team. Now, what makes Garboil so dangerous is his use of both breath attacks and explosion magic. Aside from elemental aspects, damage in the Dragon Quest franchise can be split into 3 categories: physical, magical, and breath. This third type is usually reserved for dragons, elementals, or other monsters that use naturally produced elemental damage. Breath attacks are very dangerous because there are very few ways to reduce the damage you receive from them. I'm pretty sure this game has like maybe 2 now that I think about it. The Dragon Shields and the level 32 pre-spell Insulatal. These effects stack, which is very fortunate because Garboil's Inferno does crazy damage. Really what makes this guy so dangerous is that he gets up to 3 attacks per turn and all his strongest moves hit the whole party. That and Balthazar's class change causing her to just kind of waste turns at random. This fight was a little tricky. Yet, despite all his power, we managed to pull through. As the Fiend's life fades, he finally makes the connection. Many years ago, in this very same spot, the hero Ortega fought against Garboil and his army of monsters. Despite felling countless foes, more and more beasts would replace their slain allies. Realizing he would eventually be overwhelmed, Ortega decided to make the ultimate sacrifice. Throughout the whole of our quest, we've chased desperately after our father's shadow. In every corner of the world, we'd hear tales of his greatness and see the results of his unyielding fight to protect humanity. There was not a step along our path that did not feel like Ortega had already tread it. And yet, as we hurl the Mountain Cleaver into the depths of Mount Necrogond, we take a step beyond our father. The explosive eruption marks the passing of a torch, the accomplishment of the great undertaking of the heroes of yesterday. Now we bravely stride forth beyond what the heroes Ortega and Simao gave their lives trying to make real. To say this makes the addition of all the Ortega scenes worthwhile would be a colossal understatement. Despite Dragon Quest III's impressive customization and vast world, the original release of the game is lacking in the writing department. Each region of the game is part of a small, fairly self-contained story that doesn't usually try too hard to connect back to the main quest to defeat the Archfiend. And even that gets very little narrative presence, save for some of the boss monsters mentioning Baramos before dying. The remake takes a big step towards changing that. New and old boss monsters alike have been given the specific job to stop the hero, changing the originally one-note Archfiend into a scheming, paranoid strategist who isn't willing to take any chances. And, as mentioned, Ortega's expanded role in the story provides a new narrative drive, both to grow stronger and to try to eventually surpass his colossal legacy. And here, at Mount Necrogond, we get our payoff to both additions. Every challenge, every setback, each and every fiend Baramos threw at us in the hopes of saving himself only served to help us grow as strong as the hero Ortega. Stronger, even. And now that we've defeated the foe that ended his journey, nothing stands between us and the Archfiend. Well, except for the Maw of the Necrogond. It's not that difficult. Just gotta found a Thunderbolt Blade. That's pretty cool. As we emerge from the cavern, we find ourselves overlooking Baramos' castle. We can't get to it yet, though. There's a bit of a river in the way. Instead, we'll just kind of walk to the right toward this little structure here. This is the Necrogond Shrine, and the dude inside will just kind of casually hand us the silver orb. Now that we have all 6 orbs, we can turn to the Everbird Shrine. The shrine is enveloped by a blinding light as the egg hatches, revealing a brilliant phoenix, Ramia, the Everbird. Now that we can freely fly across the map, we have access to a lot of smaller hidden spots, which mostly just have some, like, small items and mini-medals, and it's fine. As cool as Ramia and her flying theme are, there isn't a whole lot left for us to find now that we've unlocked her. which is fine. It's about time to bring this whole adventure to a close anyways. Baramos' lair is an ominous labyrinth of interconnected stairs and passageways shrouded in an evil-feeling haze. The enemies in this place can be pretty tough, but there are liquid metal slimes, so if you get some lucky critical hits, you might find yourself a lot higher level than when you started. As we fight deeper into the castle, we're able to pick out more and more environmental hints about this place's history. Defaced tapestries and statues with replaced heads paint a vain picture of the structure's current self-aggrandizing residence. At the end of the dungeon, we find a great staircase leading down into the crypt Baramos uses as his throne room, where we find the Archfiend sat atop a frightful throne. Baramos announces that our fate was sealed the moment we chose to stand against him. Then he does this like Dragon Ball Z-ass power surge, and the final battle begins. So, you remember all that stuff I mentioned made the fight with Garboil hard? Yeah, this guy takes it up a level. In every version of 3, Baramos is one of, if not the most difficult encounter in the game. Not only can he attack up to 3 times per turn, he casually tosses out Inferno and Kaboom like it's nothing. He also has a host of annoying status moves like Spooky Aura, which lowers your spell resistance, Dazzle, which reduces accuracy, and Fuddle, which is just Confuse. You know, because that's fair. He's also smart enough to stop casting spells entirely if you happen to cast Bounce on your party members. And the worst part of his moveset? Blasto. While not particularly accurate, if the spell does manage to connect, it launches a target into the distance Team Rocket style, removing them from the current battle entirely. Losing a party member can be brutal in this fight, so we're gonna cross our fingers that nothing bad happens. Oh, it's okay. We still have the power of like 100 dudes who can just jump this guy. Go, my monsters. And then he fucking explodes. The room fills with a warm light as the mysterious voice congratulates us on our victory before warping us back to Aliahan. People are celebrating our victory in the streets as we make our way towards the castle. Finally, after so much fighting and struggle, the world is saved and peace is restored to So, remember how we just spent the whole game trying to take down this one specific guy, and how all the new bosses tied back to him, finally giving him like a little bit of character? Yeah? Basically, he's just a mook for an even more scary evil guy. This guy, Zoma. He's the Lord of the Underworld, whatever that means, and basically he's gonna fucking get us. I can imagine you might be asking, hey, was there any foreshadowing for this at all? No. Okay, maybe? There's this soothsayer in Baharata who warns us that the Archfiend is a master of ice and darkness, or something like that. But Baramos just chucks bombs and napalm at people, so like, that can't be him, right? But aside from that, no. Oh, and in case you're like curious, this isn't the twist. That night we get a vision of a giant mass of clouds clearing and revealing a structure in the middle of a dense mountain range. Now that we've got a new evil dude to defeat, this is our next destination, so we might as well get flying. This strange place is inhabited by elves, dwarves, talking horses, and this mysterious group of human clergy led by a high priest who definitely won't have any story relevance later. Here we meet the Dragon Queen, the protector of the world and servant to the goddess herself. Why didn't she do anything to stop Baramos if her job is to protect the world? Unfortunately, despite being a very cool dragon, she's also very old and weak and is actually dying in the next 5 minutes or something. She lets us know that our next step should be to travel to the Pit of Gyaga to reach the underworld. Oop, looks like her time is up. She hands us this magic orb of light, then vanishes in a flash, leaving behind an egg. I'm pretty sure divine dragons work on some sort of like reincarnation system, but the game never really goes into it. Anyways, if you take a second to talk to the High Priest, he'll say some totally not ominous stuff about the two worlds being in disorder, and how if everything was as it should be, the Dragon Queen wouldn't have died. Yup, that's totally normal. Before we go check out the Pit of Gyaga, I decided I might as well class change Kalamazoo again. Okay, now we'll check out the pit. Oh damn, there's like darkness all over the place. Anyways, go my orb. And without any hesitation, we throw ourselves into the pit. We find ourselves on a small island behind a stone wall. A Tuffy NPC storms out of the building and immediately flashbangs us with fully voice-acted Shakespearean English. He invites us inside and we tell him of our plans to defeat Zoma. The man is awestruck and reveals that no person in all of Alifgard would... Wait a second. Okay, now it's time to talk about the twist. Turns out, Dragon Quest III is a prequel to the original Dragon Quest. Nowadays, this is pretty well known, which sort of makes this reveal less of a surprise and more of an eventuality, but back when the original Famicom and NES versions came out, this was a crazy turn of events. You mean this seemingly disconnected game is part of the story of the last two games? That's so cool! And sure, it is a pretty sick twist if you decide to play using release order. So let's talk play order real quick. Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 make up what is known as the Erdrick Trilogy, a loosely interconnected narrative that follows the adventures of the hero Erdrick and their descendants. Over the years, players have decided on two generally acknowledged play orders, release and chronological. While the only difference is the placement of DQ3, each playthrough offers a substantially different read on the Alefgard twist. Whether this serves as a culminating capstone to your journey across the region, or your introduction to the land and its people, it's ultimately up to you, the player, how you want to experience the story. At least, that's how I assume it's supposed to work. I ended up with a very different experience. This playthrough of DQ3 HD wasn't a solo endeavor. I was quite fortunate to have another perspective while playing through the game. Now, when we both started this game, neither of us had played the original, but I was the only one to have played DQ1. This is important because the entirety of the Underworld section of DQ3 is just one giant homage to the first game. And I don't just mean we're exploring the same map, the way the plot plays out here is literally a beat-for-beat reenactment of OG DQ1's questline. Minor DQ1 spoilers from here on out. The objective is to reach the Demon King's castle, located in the same place as the Dragon Lord's castle. To do that, you must form the Rainbow Drop by combining the Sunstone, Staff of Rain, and Sacred Amulet. These can be found in Tangential Castle, the Shrine of Spirit, and the Tower of Rubus. Additionally, you'll need to collect the Fairy Flute and Coal to advance your quest. This is a really involved process that has you visiting every nook and cranny across the realm while exploring the past versions of well-known locations and interacting with historic figures that will shape the world into what we experience in later games. If you've played any version of DQ1, this is a non-stop helping of references and callbacks. If the only other Dragon Quest game you've played is 9, this means nothing to you. And here lies a problem with Dragon Quest III's final act. Its significance is completely lost if you haven't had a chance to play Dragon Quest I first. So what? Is release the correct play order? Well, seeing as I'm in the middle of playing DQ2 HD right now, no, definitely not. You gotta make sure you play that one last. Alright, so is it DQ1, then DQ3? Well, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. It doesn't matter, because this final stretch is just kind of a mess in general. While DQ3's story is very bare bones, with the HD version only managing to partially salvage it through the whole Ortega thing, this last section doesn't even try. For all its references to the original game, there isn't really any plot here. You can't hold a narrative together with references, Hori! Even when the HD remake tries to add a bit more by introducing my goats, Dream Whisperer and Overseer, it doesn't fucking matter because they don't actually have a role in this game besides giving you a MacGuffin. Why am I going over here? Because the king told you to earlier. Oh, what about over here? Because the king told you to earlier. Hey, so in the first and second game, there's this town named Galenholm, and in this game, it's just his parents' house. Is he like an important character? No, because he just spends the entire end of the game being a fucking loser chud in Cantlin, stroking it to how cool he thinks he is. Even when we meet the literal creation deity, all she can offer us is a little orb upgrade and a golden name tag. And you know what the worst part is? They tried to make it more story relevant by making the most awful fucking writing choice they could have made. They brought Ortega back to life. After talking to the Tuffy NPC, we're given a ship and told to travel to Tantagel. Here we have a chance to speak with the king, who literally opens by name-dropping our old man. Turns out, several years ago he just showed up in the kingdom as an amnesiac and started doing hero stuff before leaving without warning. Okay, no, stop. How did he survive the lava? This is some fucking Satoru Gojo level bullshit. Lava, super hot molten stone from the depths of the planet. One of the most dangerous substances on Earth. Able to reach temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, it will instantly immolate any organic material before it even reaches the surface. No living being could hope to survive falling into the molten crust. With the sole exception of the hero Ortega. And then they don't even have the courtesy to tell you how to actually reach Zoma's castle? They want you to just wander around talking to each and every NPC while you search for a lead. In fact, most of the game's first couple hours are designed to be as tutorially as possible. NPC dialogue is written both as world building and directions for what to do next. God damn it. Since I'd played Dragon Quest I quite recently, I decided to just kind of follow the route from that game. My first stop is Talantair Tunnel, a strange ruin that prevents use of magic. According to the scant lore we're given, in the distant past, the earth was torn open and Zoma literally crawled out of the depths of hell, forever cursing the tunnel. Wild. Anyways, we can find the hero's shield in here. Why? Something about monsters stealing all the heroes' equipment from Tangential Castle or something? I don't know. Next, we head northwest to Galen's house. Who's Galen? Wouldn't you like to know? His parents will tell us to look for him in Cantlin, but if you happen to go into the basement and walk over to this one spot by accident, you'll find the Lyre of Ire. Our next goal is to wander over to the town of Cole. Here we find the fairy flute as well as a depressed swordsmith from Japan. Now, I know you're probably immediately wondering, how on earth did a random dude from Japan end up here in the underworld? The same way Ortega did. The devs felt like it. If you travel back to his house in the overworld, you can bring him his old hammer, which unlocks a bunch of new gear in his weapon shop. Okay, we're gonna do an important new side quest here. In this spot, that will eventually become Quagmire Cave, we find some of the Robin Hoodlums doing some mining work. They tell us their boss got thrown into Tantagel prison for trying to steal something important and share a rumor that there's some sort of special ore in Gaia's navel. He's talking about the blue rock from a while ago. Before we grab it, we're gonna go pay Robin a quick visit, then nab the thing he was trying to steal, the Sunstone. See, we're the heroes, so it's okay when we do it. Alright, let's go get that rock. First we'll need another Wrecking Ball, then we can go get some Zenithia. I think this might be a Dragon Quest XI reference, but I haven't played that one yet. We then take the ore to Ortega's dwarf friend and he uses it to upgrade our old man's helmet into the Auroral Helm. Neat. Next we swing by Domdara. This is the only game in which it isn't a ruin, so that's kinda cool. Really, the only reason we're here is to collect the immensely valuable lump of orichalcum that's just lying in a horse field. You can also meet a dancer from Asham here and then go tell her old coworkers where she ended up. It's optional, but it gets you a magic bikini, which was the best armor for non-hero female characters in the original game. Yeah, whatever, man. Next, we'll make our way south to Cantlin. Here we can meet that Galen guy I mentioned. He doesn't have anything of value to say, nor does he do anything interesting. But he's here, I guess. We can also meet the scientist dude who's trying to make a giant stone guardian to protect the town. He's gonna call it Golem, and I can't see how this could possibly ever go wrong. Oh, he also has the Sword of Kings just laying around. He gives it to us for free since he can't use it to make the Golem, but it is broken in half. So it's a good thing we help the swordsmith in Cole who offers to fix it for free. Now we've got 3 of the 4 pieces of legendary equipment. Next, we're gonna head south from Cantlin to this evil fucked up poison swamp. Our destination is the Shrine of Spirit, where we meet these 2 fairies. These are Overseer and Dream Whisperer. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, they don't have a big role in the story, so they go unnamed. Which is a little weird, given that Dream Whisperer is revealed to have been the voice that did the personality quiz at the beginning of the game, and has been giving us our cryptic dreams ever since. It's just kinda lame, you know? It's kinda disappointing. She gives us the Staff of Rain and tells us we need to free the goddess Rubis, who's trapped in her shrine. We shimmy on over to the tower and let ourselves in. This dungeon is kinda whatever. It's got this electrified floor you can easily avoid thanks to the 3D movement, and these annoying tiles that mess with your controls. Believe it or not, we can actually find the legendary armor here. You just kinda have to make your way across this annoying walkway without falling. At the top of the shrine, we find this cathedral-looking structure with this super ominous statue of a chained angel in the back. Before we can do anything, the literal soul of Baramos manifests to stop us. Where the original Baramos fight has more than earned its spot as hardest fight in the game, this chump needs 2 Ash Demons to actually make him any sort of challenge. It does sort of help that Kalamazoo has undergone Twink Death and is full Baramaxing now. The Soul of Baramos' moveset hasn't changed a whole lot since his death, but at least he isn't firing blast. Motherfucker! Suffering a second defeat, the Undead Fiend starts blabbering something about how it was us who defeated the OG Baramos and not Ortega. Man, I can't even beat the game's first final boss without Ortega getting all the credit. We play the fairy flute, freeing Rubis from her stone prison. Unfortunately, she's not strong enough to do a whole lot besides remind us we need the rainbow drop to reach Zoma, and then slightly power up the Orb of Light. You know, it's the thought that counts, I guess. She gives us the sacred amulet and vanishes in a flash of light. Okay, we've got everything we need to finally go after Zoma, but I am not bringing a gadabout with me to do it. As in most Dragon Quest games, there's a specific spot on the map in which only slime-type enemies can be found. In DQ3 HD, it's this island here. This is where we're gonna farm liquid metal slime for experience. Oh, I almost forgot. There's this totally missable scene with Simao's son if you go back to Minoza after doing the whole mountain cleaver thing. I only bring it up because this one line here, there is more than just one foe in our midst, could maybe be foreshadowing for Zoma? It still sucks, so thanks for nothing, I guess. We get the rainbow drop from the priest in the sanctum, then make our way over to Rimuldar. Turns out Ortega spent a little bit of time here too, cause, you know, of course he was able to cross the entire continent and some ocean too. Alethgard. Teeming with hosts of powerful monsters unseen in the overworld, only the most hardened of warriors could hope to traverse this realm unharmed. Adventuring through these lands without allies is a fool's errand, surely to result in death. Unless, of course, you are the hero Ortega. Rainbow drop time. Entering the Lord of the Underworld's castle, we are met with hosts of powerful fiends and a generally spooky atmosphere. Very cool final dungeon vibes. Eventually reach this deliberate-looking space with a bridge over a vast ice sheet. Here we No way! No! Are you serious? It's fucking Ortega. This jabroni is just down here. That means he skipped the whole rainbow drop bullshit. That's like the one thing you need to do with this stupid castle. You do it in this game, you do it in DQ1, hell, you even do it in DQ2. The rule is, if you want into the castle, you gotta get the rainbow drop. A divine artifact allowing access to the Demon King's castle by creating a bridge of pure light. Forging the item requires a hero to collect the Sunstone, Staff of Rain, and Sacred Amulet. It is said nobody alive can reach the castle without it. Nobody. Except the hero Ortega, of course. The fuck did he do? Swim? Anyways, he gets totally owned. Then we have this scene where we hold our dying dad in our arms as he mournfully laments never seeing his wife and kid again, unable to recognize us because the fire blast took his sight and hearing. And then if you bothered to get the helmet upgraded, he somehow recognizes it? Somehow? And then he realizes it's you, and then he's fucking dead, I guess? Look, I'm not gonna pretend this scene was particularly impactful. I already said it, this motherfucker should have died in that volcano. This scene is not earned. They're trying to just get another touching moment out of Ortega by killing him off again. But at this point, it just doesn't mean anything. Whatever, man, let's just finish the game. But I want to switch Lyle back to a Monster Angler first, because I just like the design more. Oh, and pick up some better armor for her and Balthazar. Those bikinis are cringe. Finally, after almost 40 hours and the entire length of this video, we stand before Zoma, King of the Underworld.
But first, fight my stupid Hydra that killed your dad. And then fight Baramos again. And then fight Baramos again.
Okay, now we can fight Zoma. Zoma starts the fight shrouded in his spooky darkness, which reduces damage taken and boosts damage dealt. The best strategy is to hand the ball of light to your fastest party member so they can flashbang him instantly. This immediately starts phase 2. Zoma is a seriously tough customer. Able to act up to 3 times per turn and casually tossing out some of the strongest ice-based attacks in the game, this guy is designed to be no joke. Even if you manage to properly set up your defensive spells and abilities, he's the kind of MF to just start the turn with Disruptive Wave to just ruin your day. All that said, if you're like me and have already had your party reclass twice and back up to level 40 range, let's just say it's a little bit overkill. As Zoma kneels defeated, he offers us an ominous premonition. Years from now, long after our hero's death, a new evil will rise to threaten the land. And then he fucking explodes. With the King of the Underworld defeated, his castle begins collapsing. We rush to try and escape, but without warning, the ground gives out underneath us. Strangely, we find ourselves launched from the chasm in the depths of Talantair Tunnel. As we rush out of the cavern, the reverberations start to bring the ceiling of this place down too. Emerging from the cave, we hear a colossal thud as the sun begins to shine on Alefgard for the first time in countless years. So funny story, the loud thud was actually the doorway between worlds shutting forever. I guess it was like tied to Zoma's life force or something, but we're stuck down here and there's no getting around it. At least that's what we're told has happened. Unfortunately, I can't really get into that because Dragon Quest II, so we're gonna have to wait a little bit, but I'll touch on it in the next video, I promise. We return to Castle Tantaja where we are greeted as heroes and bestowed with the title of Erdrick, finally confirming with 100% certainty that this game is a prequel. The hero's armor is passed down through the generations and our title and deeds become legend. As the credits roll, we see a number of references to Dragon Quest I, including our hero setting up all the items we're going to need for that adventure. We're also treated to visions of the people of the overworld enjoying the newfound peace won through Zoma's defeat. All save for our mother, endlessly awaiting a child that will never return home. As the credits draw to a close, we see a final scene of the High Priest standing before the Dragon Queen's egg, swearing to raise the unborn dragon to a fine successor. This he swears on his name, Hargon. Now, this is where usually I do my whole breakdown of the game and stuff for the end of the video, but if you'll bear with me for just a little longer, there's one more thing I'd like to discuss. Starting with the Super Famicom version of Dragon Quest III, a new challenge awaited players who successfully defeated Zoma and saw the credits roll. In the back of the Dragon Queen's palace is a circular mark on the floor. During the main game, there's nothing of note here, but the fairy standing nearby tells you that this palace is the closest place to heaven, and that legend says true heroes may be able to reach there through this place. Well, if you come back here after beating the main game, you'll notice this light shining down into the circle. When you take a step inside, the screen waves and we find ourselves on a mysterious floating island high in the clouds. Before us lies the entrance to a cave, and within the cave is a super dungeon, I suppose. It's not an original structure, instead using maps from different locations of the game, but with new monsters and loot. This place is pretty dangerous. There's even a floor where King Hydra can just spawn as a regular enemy. If you manage to push through all the floors of this strange dungeon, you'll eventually find yourself descending the stairs of the Portoga Lighthouse and arriving in this weird castle. This is the Cloudsgate Citadel, realm of King Zenith. Now, by this point you're probably wondering what the point of bringing up this random post-game dungeon is. Honestly, the main reason I'm including this section is to set up for the Dragon Quest II video, and potentially for the Zenithian Trilogy, you know, assuming we actually get those games. I can't really go into all that without touching on Dragon Quest VI spoilers, but there should, maybe, end up being a connection. There's another reason too. Continuing to ascend the Citadel Tower eventually brings us face to face with the master of this structure, Shenlong. He's an uber-powerful dragon capable of making a person's wishes come true. I mean, he's got the Dragon Ball entrance animation, so that figures. The catch is that you need to defeat him in 25 turns or less, and he's really strong. Fortunately, those King Hydras from earlier give 22k experience per kill, and I ran into a lot of them. When you manage to defeat the dragon, he presents you with a list of wishes. 1. Create a new monster arena in the well in Japan. 2. Get a copy of Guns and Buns, which grants the vamp personality. 3. Unlock the ability to dye the hero's hair. 4. Receive the powerful Rubis sword. 5. Unlock the even harder Temple of Trials dungeon. And finally 6. To resurrect Ortega. Now, the new dungeon is kind of just a crazy challenge for people who still want more game and features the ridiculously strong Grand Dragon, finally making his return from the Game Boy Color port of the game. That's cool! What was that about reviving Ortega? So basically, you can use one of your wishes to bring your old man back to life. When you next return home, your mom will excitedly inform you that your father has finally returned. Speaking with him, you find out that he only has memories up until around Mount Necrogond, but that he seems aware that some time has passed since then? Yet something about your grown-up face seems oddly familiar. And that's it. No, really, he just hangs out in your house with your mom, which is nice, I suppose, but also why? Look, I know this isn't a new addition to the game. You can make the same wish in every version of the game that has Shenlong, but that doesn't make it any less strange narratively. I guess since they already pretended to kill him off once, then just straight up bringing him back is fair game now, narrative and thematic impact be damned. And that, finally, is Dragon Quest III, a legendary game that pioneered the RPG genre as we know it. Dragon Quest III is a legendary game. Its place not only in RPG history, but in the history of games at large is monumental. Offering players such a vast world, epic quest, and high-level customization is impressive, even by today's standards. By all accounts, this should be an easy 10 for me, but it's not. Far from it. Maybe it's because I'd seen what this team was capable of after playing DQ1 HD first. Maybe it's because, as I write this script and record this video, I'm marching through the frozen wastes of Renderak in DQ2 HD. Maybe it has nothing to do with that at all, and it's just how DQ3 has always been. But I found myself disappointed. As cool as the character creation is, what really drew me to DQ3 was its world and story, and maybe that was a mistake. The vast world of DQ3, inspired by the myriad cultures of our own, feels like little more than approximation and light stereotype. Far from offensive, yet not unique enough in its presentation to feel like much more than themed set dressing. While the addition of voice work has helped these locales at least feel more immediately different, the lack of a strong narrative presence hinders the game's presentation significantly. Speaking of, in all previous versions of Dragon Quest III, the story has been one of the weakest aspects. A lack of ongoing storytelling means the game's opening exposition is forced to carry the narrative for the entire run. While this might work for something like DQ1, which has a fairly brief playtime by comparison, once you start bumping up against the 20-hour mark and nothing new has been introduced to the story, it's not a great look. While the HD version of the game tries to remedy this by introducing all the new scenes with Ortega's past, this move doesn't really help this game's story and kind of makes me wish I'd been playing an actual Ortega game at times. That said, the newly added bosses do help sell the threat of Baramos and his forces a bit more, which in turn gives a monster a previously non-existent sliver of character to work with. And of course, the best thing to come out of all of this is the new encounter with Garboil at Mount Necrogond. Finally having an in-text payoff to Ortega's character is an excellent way to reinforce the hero's agency while making the entire journey finally feel like our own. It's an excellent moment that perfectly tees up the end of the game. And then the final act happens. If I haven't made it blatant enough, I do not care for this final stretch of the game. in both the original and HD versions. The inclusion of Alefgard was a late-stage development choice, and you can feel it. Towns and cities feel bland with barely a hint of personality, there's even less story compared to the first chunk of the game, and what we do get is just what's told to us by the King of Tantagel, and the whole thing is just running back DQ1 with like, maybe one less step. Sure, I get that that's the point, but it still adds over 5 hours of runtime to the game. And then they had the audacity to bring Ortega back to life for a forced moment of tragedy that really doesn't contribute much of anything. The whole final stretch feels like an excessive, overindulgent addition that, while probably well-intentioned, only serves to cheapen the rest of the game. What frustrates me the most is that they had the opportunity to make changes to 3's world and story to accommodate and foreshadow this home stretch, but chose not to in service to a surprise reveal that stopped being a surprise over a decade ago. And if the whole point was to be a cool moment for people who are getting to Dragon Quest with 3, then that fails too, because this protracted reference only works if you've already played the first game. Look, I know I'm being super harsh towards this nearly 40-year-old game, but it's only because I know what this series has shown itself capable of. Hell, seeing what this very same team ended up doing with DQ1 and 2's remake doesn't do this one very many favors, because they clearly are able to breathe new life into older games. I want to be able to adore every moment of this game, but the shadow cast by its sequels are just too great. Fuck man, the ending is just so perfectly bittersweet too, it should be a free win. Man. But, after all of that, I would still recommend people try this one out. My preferences for storytelling in games are very much outside the norm, and I think most people will have a wonderful time with this game. While the world may not be the deepest, its vastness does lend to the feeling of a world-spanning adventure. And when it comes to classic-feeling RPG gameplay, the tweaks and additions made for the HD remake add a splash of modernity to an evergreen game system. Plus, since it's the first entry in the new take on the Erdrick Trilogy, I highly advise against skipping any part of this incredible story. I'm gonna go ahead and give the original, Dragon Quest III The Seeds of Salvation, a score of fine. And for Dragon Quest III HD 2D, a final score of great. Finally, we've reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed your time, why not leave a like? And if you're interested in what else I might cover, spoiler, it's gonna be more Dragon Quest, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to turn on notifications. And if you're interested in what happens next in the Erdrick Trilogy, consider checking out my video on Dragon Quest I and its remake. I'm pretty proud of my work there. But for now, I've got to get to work on my next video. That DQ2 script isn't going to write itself, especially with how this all comes to a close. Thanks again for watching, and hope I'll see you back here again soon. Peace.